Kind of the reworked title, though, is Sorry, I'm Not Home Right Now. So a couple little introductory images. This is me in my habitat. These are a couple of photos actually from my time here in Alfred and my time previously in the Institute. So after my MFA, I spent a little over a year working in the Institute as a technician. And this is kind of my happy spot. I love digital technology. I love installing it. So I felt like these were pretty reflective kind of examples of me in my element. So we're going to do a quick crash course on some work that I did kind of between graduating and leaving Alfred and 2020 when the pandemic hit. So I think a lot about landscape, and I often will use landscape and nature as kind of a metaphor for kind of internal feelings or internal kind of struggles that I'm thinking about. And something that I'm recognizing that I've done a lot in my early work and early explanations of work is trying to find a sense of making it feel more academic or feel more serious, because it's having a vulnerability in my work and having the ability to speak about kind of these internal emotional elements was not something I was really very comfortable with, even in grad school. So this is a series of work that I did, kind of kicking off in 2018. And this first piece is, I'm a big sci-fi fan, and so I was kind of thinking of these speculative futures, and I live out west now. Climate change is very in our face out there. We have smoke season, we have fire season, and something that kind of kicked off in my head was this idea of what happens in the future if we don't have a sense of landscape, or we don't have a sense of these spaces that I oftentimes take for granted because I live so ingrained within them. So I developed this idea of a sunset that you would install in your home or within a space. And it's broken up between two hacked Kindle fires. I oftentimes will use easily available technology. I oftentimes will use things from Amazon. I understand that there is some cognitive dissonance between that, but I think it does tie into some of these ideas. So this is essentially a sunset that you would set up and that you could view with a partner. Now, the partner element is something that I've rarely openly brought up into work, but at this time, I had just transitioned to moving back to my hometown, essentially, fresh out of grad school, and I did not have a partner at that time, and I was lonely, as I think a lot of us have felt over periods of time. And so while I was hiding this kind of idea of the seriousness kind of between climate change and all of these things, I'm also thinking about, like, well, wouldn't it be sad not to have a sunset, to have a first kiss by? And wouldn't it be nice to have that first kiss under a sunset? But these are thoughts that I kind of kept locked in at this point. I often think of the installation materials as materials themselves. As an MFA student here, I remember during thesis time, an argument I got with one of my ceramist cohort where they were trying to tell me to have a projection over a monitor because they wanted to light their work a specific way, and I told them if I wanted the piece projected, then I would have chosen to use a projector, because a projector versus a screen is the difference for me between stoneware or porcelain. So in using these smaller screens and using these colored screens and in using these cables, I'm thinking about the materiality of installation and the materiality of kind of, again, of the medium. So this theme kind of continues on. Again, I'm thinking a lot about my climate anxiety and playing with these ideas. And I am also doing something that at the time I was a little uncomfortable with, but has now become a big part of my process or my practice, where I was revisiting weird bits of video that I made in grad school and never knew what to do with. I don't sketch like a traditional, or in a traditional sense. I don't use a sketch pad. I make short videos. And then I don't know what to do with them. So I started revisiting these, and this is a piece that kind of came out of that, where I had this weird, I was learning how to use Blender for the first time, so I did the fluid simulation and I made this weird ocean, and then I had another kind of weird animation that I had made using a hacked Kinect, and this was kind of my first dive into this idea of 3D animation. So I created a space that to me kind of felt like what the world would be like once all the glaciers melted. So again, kind of carrying on and sticking with themes of nature and the natural world, I move into this next piece, which I think is where I really start to figure out that I do have maybe more intimate or more autobiographical feelings in my work, or I'm at least willing to admit them more than I have been in previous work. So this is an installation, an interactive installation called They Could Begin to Thrive Again. And again, I'm taking a little bit of my Alfred knowledge with me. So one of our old technicians, Mark Klingensmith, had this really brilliant way of mounting IMAX to walls. And it's something that I used in my MFA show. And at this time, I'd started teaching at a university and found the joys of university surplus. And so I was able to purchase these 2009 IMAX for, I think it was like $100 a piece. They're about 30 pounds each. They don't run particularly fast anymore, but they're really great at running a max patch. So with this installation, I set up a max patch on the computers, and then I set up these plants with little lavalier mics attached to them, and I created an audio reactive patch that allows you to speak to the plant. So within kind of the plant world, kind of starting back in the 70s, there's this whole idea that if you speak to plants, they will grow better. And this project started when I saw an Instagram story of a friend of mine talking about how good they are at watering their plants and how bad they are at watering themselves. And that struck me pretty deeply because oftentimes I think it is easier to care for things, be it plants or pets, than it is to care for oneself. And I started thinking about the plants I care for and how I talk to them and nurture them. And I started to think about plants in botanical gardens and how they must grow so strong because people go there to see them, and they go there to kind of exist within that space and feel and be in awe of that nature. So I set up a space where you could intentionally speak to the plants and have this kind of video and sound relationship with them. I don't consider myself necessarily a writer, but I do kind of work through things through words. Oftentimes, I took a few creative writing classes in undergrad, and I think some of that stuck. So oftentimes I will kind of accompany writing with my work, because it's just another way for me to process these things. So again, this is me kind of explaining what I think about these plants within a public space. And along with that, I printed off little booklets with little cues, so people would have kind of some prompts on what they could say or ask the plants. Because I understand that when you are thrust in front of a microphone, you don't always know what to say or how to act. So this is a test or an example of how that patch works. So I just have a podcast going, and I'm using that as my audio sample to see how the video will react. So this all happened kind of right before COVID kicked off. And at that time, I had just started teaching. I was asked recently while I was here, why did you go to Alfred? Why did you get an MFA? It was not to become a teacher. It was not to become an instructor. It was really to have, as I like to describe them, 2 very selfish years where I got to just dive into my practice and dive into figuring out my medium and play with things. But as often happens once you collect an MFA, I did start to teach. And then COVID hit. I was not a sourdough bread baking girly. Well, I don't identify as a net artist. I am a child of the internet. LiveJournal, MySpace, Tumblr, you name it, these are all spaces that I have existed and spaces I still exist in. So I do use memes a lot as references. I'll use the language of memes and of iconography a lot in those short sketches that I mentioned kind of earlier. So with COVID came the ability to teach online. Now I'm an adjunct primarily. I also work in film, but as an adjunct, that means I never always know where I'm teaching or how many classes I will have per quarter or per semester. So occasionally there can be a bit of a scarcity mentality. So I thought, well, shoot, we're all online. I don't have to commute. I'm going to take every class I can get. So this is the year that I taught 11 courses during a global pandemic, which financially was fabulous for me. But something I did not realize at the time is that it would kind of turn into a period of pretty near debilitating burnout. And this is kind of where I know we've kind of rushed through some of that early stuff. This is kind of, I think, where the heart or the meat of my talk kicks off. How do you make work? What does an artistic practice look like once you have left school, entered into the real world, IRL if you will, and what does that look like in a timeline that is difficult, whether that is a pandemic, late stage capitalism, what name you. So those are things that I'm really being mindful of in this time, and something even within this residency that I've been thinking of. So I teach all these classes, and while I'm doing that, I'm still making work. I'm getting a little bit softer in my work. I'm kind of getting a little bit kitschier at times. I'm spending even more time on the internet and starting to, I think, lean into these internet aesthetics that I have often skirted around because they do feel, they don't feel serious. They don't feel like they have maybe that academic presence that I thought I needed in my work. So this is a piece that I made specifically for a show that just existed online, because that is where we existed in the world, but did eventually turn into an installation. So this is the installation view of it. Again, I'm kind of using how I am touching the ground and how I've processed this to highlight how I feel romantically or internally. Again, this kind of desire to be soft, to be loved, to be tender. And with that, we kind of see, again, some of that use of language. So I have a poem that in the installation view, I will often turn into a small business card, and you can take it home with you. But as I was teaching and as I was creating work, I was also working in film within the limits that we had. I was working on my professional experience, and I was really feeling this sense of like productivity, and this desire to be productive and to perform productivity. And that is when I kind of started to crash a little.
You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording error, please check the number and try your call again.
I stopped making work completely because I was exhausted. I hadn't quite realized that in kind of this performance of productivity and in accepting all of these teaching positions and all of these roles at galleries and all of these shows and all of these opportunities, that I was overextending myself because, again, I kind of felt like I had this, this is what you do to make your career better. This is what you do to attain a certain level of artistic success, whatever. And I think that is the case to some extent, but I think it's something that should be more mindful maybe. And during this time, we've got the pandemic, Trump is elected, politics are always an undercurrent of my work, even if they're not very clear. I do think we live in an inherently political system. I think I inhabit an inherently political body at times. I started to get a little nihilistic. Why make art? The world is burning. What is the point? So I started just doing these small practices. So this is just a little GIF, and it's a series. I have a whole host of these now where I'm just Googling my feelings and making something silly. It's hard to maintain a connection to your practice and your community when it feels like everything is a constant assault. Similar to dial-up internet or the sound of dial-up internet, I think when you're going through these times of burnout or these times of low productivity, it can feel like getting out of the muck and the mud to kind of make those connections. For me, rest can often feel really unproductive. Again, I think there is occasionally, especially in today's culture with our approach to the internet and our approach to social media, an idea of performativity when it comes to art practices. You have to have so many posts on Instagram, you have to engage in TikTok. And again, I don't think those are inherently bad, but I think it is something that can kind of create a level of angst or a level of expectation that feels pretty terrible if you feel like you are falling flat from that. It is hard to take the rest or to disassociate with what you need. So I eventually decided to do that for a bit. I took about a year off of making serious work. I threw myself into film production during that time. I'm a grip and a gaffer on commercials and films. Basically, I haul around electrical equipment and I set up lighting. And it has been a really great way for me to actually learn how to be a better installation artist while getting paid. I now know how to not blow up circuits, and that maybe the daisy chaining that I used to do back in the day was probably a bad idea. So it's been a really wonderful way for me to kind of still stay within that practice while taking a little bit of a mental break, taking some mental load off that. This is an image I love to use for things. This is actually taken out here in Western New York at, I believe it was a Salvation Army somewhere near Bath, I want to say. We were, some friends of mine and I were out there, and they just had all these CRT monitors behind there kind of disintegrating into nature, and it's something that I think of. So during this time I rested, I started to regroup and kind of prioritize things, and I started to make these small sketches again.
If the mountain seems too big today, then climb the hill instead. If the morning brings you sadness, it's okay to stay in bed. If the day ahead weighs heavy and your plans feel like a curse, there's no shame in rearranging, don't make yourself feel worse. If the shower stings like needles and the bath feels like you drown, if you haven't washed your hair in days, don't throw away your crown. The day is not a lifetime, a rest is not defeat. Don't think of it as failure, just a quiet, kind retreat. It's okay to take a moment from an anxious, fractious mind. The world will not stop turning while you get realigned. The mountain will still be there when you want to try again. You can climb it in your own time. Just love yourself till then.
So that is a mix of some video that I made originally during thesis, some video that I shot just out and about. I shoot video probably every single day, whether on my big camera or on my phone more often than not these days, and a sound from TikTok. If you're not a part of TikTok, that's okay, but it is a fabulous space, I think, especially for media art and media artists. And I tell you what, when I heard that poem during that time, it was a really good good moment. It kind of was reaffirming my faith in humanity, which I needed at that time. So I started to just kind of make these silly little sketches, again, as I like to think. Dove back into teaching a little bit. This is an assignment I do for students sometimes where I have them set up a still life that acts as a self-portrait as well. So they're taking the objects around them and intentionally kind of setting up that still life in a way that they can get across where they are in life. So as you see here, I've got my destroyed pint of Ben & Jerry's. I've got a Red Dead Redemption. I am a video gamer from time to time, even though I don't have as much time to do it as I think I would like. I've got all my hard drives, because that is where all of my work lives. I've got my plants. I've got my makeup. I've got all of these things, my inhaler and a mask that utilize that. And then I take that further, start to do some post-processing. I didn't really understand about the world of especially analog video synthesis until I came to Alfred. And I always liked the idea of a glitch aesthetic, quote unquote, but did not necessarily understand the history of it or where a lot of that imagery started until I came here. So it's something that I've kind of carried on. And that's when I started playing a little bit more with some technology that I'd always wanted to play with and never quite found time to. So this is my very first little augmented reality sketch. That is my weird little studio space that exists in a converted closet in the condo I share with my partner. And there was something in that moment that got me really excited. And there was something about kind of the ability for, obviously, imagery to come off screen, but for sound to come off screen that started to kind of make my brain tingle. And there was something about the idea that this could exist in a world outside of a gallery that has stuck with me. So where I live in Washington now, we are the second largest city in Washington outside of Seattle, but we are by no means, I think, a city or an urban setting in the progressive traditional sense. I often describe Spokane as kind of being like the Buffalo of the West Coast, in the sense that it is still near a lot of rural areas. It is very, very conservative, and unlike Buffalo, we don't have a very robust gallery system. There's a wonderful art community there, and a lot of wonderful artists, but we have a very small handful of galleries, and most artwork is shown in coffee shops or small spaces like that. And in order for me to go to a larger gallery or to go to a museum, I'm either driving to Seattle or Portland. So I'm either going 4 hours or 8 hours. One good thing about COVID was all of a sudden we had an access point to a lot of shows that people in these rural environments, and by people I mean myself included, were able to see. So something I've been thinking about a lot is, what if we what if I create a body of work that can exist outside of a gallery, that people can have access to and experience through their devices. Now, I know the idea of viewing art through the mediation of a phone or a tablet or a computer is kind of a topic of contention for some folks. I know that there's a pretty hefty group that says you can't look at art over your phone. I am not one of those people. I look at art all the time through my phone. Is it a different experience than going to the Whitney? Absolutely. But it still exists, and I think there is a space to create work for that. If you can open up an augmented reality experience on your phone, even if it is on your kitchen countertop, I think there's something interesting about that. So that kind of brings me into where I am now with my art making practice. I took some time to prioritize my energy a bit more and to figure out how to nurture my practice, and that's something that I think, or I hope that I will continue on, because ultimately a long-lasting practice is more important to me, I think, than necessarily a wildly successful practice or a performatively productive practice. So that's something that I check in with myself often with. So I kind of chose this slide to go along with that. This is a weird print I made during one of my grad critiques here. And it's a little hard to see on there, but we've got some waterfalls, because we've got some beautiful waterfalls around here. And then in a very light silver screen print, it says, "Don't go chasing." So don't go chasing those waterfalls. So let's look at some of my contemporary work. And the work that ultimately kind of pushed me into where I'm at with my residency and a lot of the stuff I've been playing with at the residency here. So a long-standing theme in my installations has been this idea of kind of creating these emotional spaces. So with this is just a weird space I made for myself to kind of meditate in and to do a little speed drawing. I don't have a robust drawing practice, but I did start off as a painter, and Procreate is something that I've been pretty fond of over the past couple years. I'm gonna skip a slide, then we'll go back because I didn't order my slides correctly. That piece is shown with this piece as well. So this is kind of that idea of that augmented reality space in the wild. Now, my major critique for this piece for myself is it is still within a gallery setting, but this is a gallery that exists within the Spokane City Hall, which is a really exciting space for me to show work because it is directly tied to our local politics, and I love the idea of creating work and knowing that our city council members have to walk past it for the next couple months while they're walking in that space. So we're back with climate anxiety, but we're back with it with kind of maybe more of a sense of hope, a sense of playfulness. This is another series that I did following that, and these are some works that I've made over the past, like 7 months, I would say, like very, very recent work. This piece here is actually a reworking of something I made in grad school. So I've mentioned it a few times now, but I was not always very honest about the idea of tenderness or vulnerability in my work, and So I've taken the time over the past, I'd say about a year, to kind of re-look at the work I've made in the past and have an intentional moment of honesty with myself where I'm realizing that while there are maybe larger or more serious themes involved, a lot of this is gushy feeling stuff. And that gushy feeling stuff is fine. And you can make work about gushy feeling stuff and it can still be serious work. I don't have to intellectualize things to give it a sense of seriousness. So these are some augmented reality activated prints. So the prints themselves really aren't that interesting. They're video stills that are fine, but I think from a printmaking perspective, I wouldn't call them great. The real magic happens when you hold up your phone and these animations pop up. Again, I'm leaning into more of that internet culture in that sense of, and playing with the fonts, the GIFs. And that's what I've been playing with here. I don't have great examples of the AR part yet, but what I've been playing with here is getting some 3D scans, because one thing that I haven't been super excited with this work, I love how activating it is. I'm really excited to work with it. I have been using a lot of pre-sourced assets, which is fine, but playing with the 3D scanner here and learning more about 3D scanning capabilities even on my own phone has been super important to me. And then playing with the sanding image processor so that I can, again, get that quote-unquote glitch aesthetic, but in a more authentic and less After Effects plug-in way has been a real treat. So what I'll be working on probably pretty shortly after this talk is actually dropping a lot of these assets into Adobe Aero and having an AR experience set up. So I'm probably going to start throwing up some QR codes around the larger, harder hull realm. So if you see one in the wild, please take your time to scan it. They're silly right now, but I'm excited to at least play with them. But yeah, that is kind of my overview on my art practice as it's been over the past few years, and kind of on some of, I guess, my coping mechanisms or my ideas about how to keep making art even when it's a weird timeline. So, thanks guys. The end.